Welcome to the Yarra Valley Living Centre and another episode of Living Well. And today I have with me Jude Pemmell, and she is going to share with us about resilience. She's lived a life of resilience, working in refugee camps, in prisons, in all kinds of scenarios, plus just living. We need so much resilience. So welcome, Jude.
Thank you, Morning.
Yeah, very good to have you here. And it's a very big topic. First of all, can you just kind of tell us what you understand by resilience?
Well, the sort of mainstream understanding of resilience is the ability to bounce back after a setback. I think that's a very simplistic understanding. I think there's far more to it than that. And, you know, when we talk about bouncing back after a setback, but what does that mean, you know? And so I'd say that setbacks may leave some people quite demolished, or to appear to be quite demolished, and with quite a bit of work to do on themselves. But see, I see that as a very good thing.
So is it the word bounce that's a bit too up?
Yeah, I think the word bounce is misleading. And I don't think it's really accurate. Because I think, you know, someone who appears to bounce back after a lot of adversity, or after each little adversity or big adversity, there may be something about it that actually isn't real. And, you know, life can be quite punishing and very challenging, and it can knock us around a fair bit. And I think it's a fair call to feel knocked around. And sometimes we have to crawl back. And that too is resilience.
Yeah.
And it can take a long time. And to me, that too is resilience. And I guess the reason I'm saying this, Morning, is because I've worked with people who've had so much adversity so early in their lives. And, you know, they've discovered their coping mechanisms, as children do. But at some point in their young adulthood, those coping mechanisms will start to kill them.
Yeah, so it might seem like they've lived with resilience, but actually just that resilience itself has been kind of eating away at them because it was just bearing. You mean something like that?
Yes, I don't think it's necessarily resilience that's eating away, but because we're programmed to survive, we're programmed to continue life and to stay in life. It's our programming. It's what life force does.
Yeah.
It's what energy does. And that programming is our strongest drive. You know, people will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid death.
Yeah.
And to stay alive in the most extreme circumstances. And so, yes, it is in our DNA. We are energy, and within that life force energy is this survival instinct. And from a spiritual perspective, you could say that is there because sometimes, you know, or the majority of the time, most people think that they are a body that will expire.
So are you kind of saying, Jude, that even just to have stayed alive would be called resilience, because you need it even to stay alive.
Yeah, I think it is part of our spiritual makeup, and that it does keep us going.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will, when they do have experience adversity, and, I talk to a lot of younger people, a lot of older people, I always have, in terms of my professional role. And people will often, or at times, when their sort of backs against the wall, will weigh up, would I be better off dead? They will face the big to be or not to be moment. Many people face this during their lives, and not just once.
Mm.
They can face it many times. And, I happened to grow up in a family. My mother was a nurse, and she loved to talk about life and death, and about life, whether there's life after death. And, there were no taboo subjects at the dinner table. And so because I grew up with that, I grew up with my curiosity was nurtured. And my mother was reading books about Buddhism when I was a little kid, and trying to explain life after death and karma to me, when I was starting school. And she would take me out into the backyard at night, and she'd point all the stars out, and she'd say to me, look, if you ever think you've got a problem, just come out here and look at the stars and look at how big the sky is. And she said, and your problems will be nothing. And she said, we attach so much importance to ourselves, but really come out here and look at this, the hugeness, the immensity of everything. And our little existence is nothing.
So she taught you coping mechanisms, also techniques to really...
She taught me really good coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
And I watched her use them herself, because, I had a single mum. And she was an extremely resourceful, intelligent feminist.
That's where you got it from.
I think I must have.
Yeah, great. Because I know that you've never, as long as I've known you, which is about 30 years, you've never shied away from probably the biggest challenges in terms of the work that you've done, like working in prisons, working in refugee camps. So a lot of people who would be asked to do those jobs would say, no, thank you.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. But I guess how I've felt about those things, because I have this huge drive, and it's called curiosity. And I love knowing and exploring how people cope in enclosed environments. And it's a bit of a contradiction. It's a bit of a paradox for me, because I'm really quite anti-establishment, I have to confess.
Yeah.
And I'm very anti-institutional. And I always have been, but I've actually been really drawn to work in large institutions.
Yeah.
I love it.
Why? Because I also think that, like I've wanted to do some work in prisons. I just did a little bit in Hong Kong, but not much. I know you've done a lot. But, sometimes the hardest thing is the whole institutionalization about the place where you are at. It's not the challenges of the people, but the you know, yeah. But you've coped with all of that, and in the refugee camps as well.
Yes, yes. The prisons, when I was first asked to work in prison, I was pretty much a rookie counsellor. Was at the beginning of my counselling career. And I was at a training session, and I met a manager of services and programs from one of the correctional institutions in Sydney, a very large one. And he was very, very, because I told him I worked with meditation, with people with addictions, and that, you know, I'd been having some really amazing experiences and successes with that. And so he was really interested. Because he was Indian, he said, would I come and work there? And I said, no, I wasn't ready. And I was a bit scared, I'll be honest with you, a bit scared of going into a prison, working with a whole bunch of men, of male criminals. But he kept ringing the place, the rehab that I worked. I was at a women's detox and rehab. He kept calling me there and saying to woo me to come and work at the prison. And he would keep faxing me contracts, which I was ripping up. And eventually I just wanted to get him off my back. He was so persistent. And so eventually I think I said, I'll do 2 sessions. And he'd say, no, 4. You know how the Indians barter? Do 4. And I'd say, no,
3.
I'll do 2. Then do 6. So we ended up, I agreed to do 12.
He was a better bargainer than you, I can see. Many more years experience.
He sent me a contract. It was their standard contract. It had to be for 12 weeks. So I said, you know, if I bail out on the first night, you'll just have to rip up the contract. And so as it was, I went in on my first night and I was hooked.
You were hooked. Why?
I was hooked.
Why?
Hook, line and sinker. Why was that? I think I could probably talk for several hours on the why, looking into it, but the men came in. There were about 8 of them. And the officer said to me, you know, that he would come back at 9 o'clock for me. And I said, will anyone be around? And he said, no.
Really? I didn't think they'd let that happen. Oh,
I was alone.
Oh, my God.
And there was a phone on the wall. And after he brought these men in, I went to see if the phone worked. There was no dial tone. It was in the middle of winter. It was around the winter equinox. And so it got dark really early because the group started at 6, but it was dark at 5, by 5. And so I'm in this old chapel that was, you know, it looked like something out of Count Dracula's castle.
Yeah.
And was really dilapidated, and the carpet was all worn and the colours were dark. And I remember just seeing this moon, this full blood moon through the chapel window. And so these men came in and the furniture was really heavy. It was an old refectory table and these really heavy things that we sat on. And so the men put things together under my instruction. They were all seemed to be about 6'6" tall. And
you're
against my diminutive,
I think.
Yeah, 5 feet and 1/4 inch I am. And so they could read my apprehension. And one of them, he was this very big, very tall Maori. And he said to me, this is after I tried the phone, he said, it hasn't worked for months. said, don't worry, you'll be all right. We'll look after you.
Very nice.
And by the end of the evening, I had heard I asked them just to fill me in, tell me, just share whatever they felt comfortable sharing about themselves, what they wanted to get from the group, what they would like to get from a group. I said, I will design this group based on what you tell me you need. And I said, I'm going to be doing some meditation with you, and they were very happy about that. So they were very open and honest. I was blown away. You don't expect that in a male environment, particularly among criminals, because it is part of the prison culture to be really tough and bulletproof. And because the way they opened up and were very emotionally open, and they had devastating stories, some of them, devastating. And I was able to just connect with where they were at and what they'd been through. I was very, very moved. But there was almost a kind of innocence about these men. And all I can say was that despite my apprehension at the beginning, by the time the group was finished, I couldn't wait to get back there.
So did you need resilience? Did that actually call on your resilience?
Well, it called on my empathy. And, when we look at ourselves as spiritual beings, we have all these, I'll just say, essential states. They are expressions of our spirituality, of our life force, of the soul. This is who I am, who we all are. And the way I see it, compassion and empathy and spontaneity and creativity, all of these things are aspects of the essence that is me. And sometimes in the process of being knocked around and kicked around by life, these expressions, one or more of these expressions of essence, can become occluded because of an experience or a set of experiences that we have. But then when we can also, our work, I believe our psychological and spiritual work, is to open that occlusion and to reconnect that aspect of essence so that it flows again.
Yeah, because what I've also found that when we do some kind of spiritual practice, I'm not sure that it's always for peace, but it really builds resilience, because life is not peaceful. I mean, we have to have resilience to face life. So when I asked that question, in what way did you need resilience? It sounds like because you had built that resilience through your own life, it was kind of natural. So you didn't feel the tension of it. Is that right?
I think I'm an empath, and I think they touched me. Their stories really touched me. That awakened feelings in me that connected me with them, that connected me with their pain and their journey and who they really are. And I just wanted to embrace them.
Yeah.
In Beautiful. A very heartfelt way. I just really wanted to get in there and support them. They were very honest. And I have always, since my first day, as someone who sits and listens to other people who are in pain or who are suffering in some way, I just feel that it's been the greatest privilege, and that it's, you know, to be entrusted with that someone being very vulnerable and sort of opening themselves up in that way. It's not easy to do. We're so programmed not to do that, socially programmed. We're so programmed to, you know, to pretend we're made of steel and never show weakness and never show pain and, you know, always look like we've got it together.
Yeah.
And that we're okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's very hard to fight that programming.
So would you say, Judy, that you helped the men to build their resilience through, you know, helping them with meditation and, you know, with the counseling? So was that part of your work there to help them to be resilient?
Look, I'll be honest with you, I think it's a recursive interaction because once we form a group, which we did that night, you know, we've formed an energy field. I'm talking quantum physics now, but we formed a morphogenic field.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can't see it, but you feel it. And it was founded on openness and vulnerability. And I was very honest with the men. I remember the end of that group. This was 31 years ago. But I remember it well.
And how long did you end up working there?
I was doing that group. I did it for 10 years. And the only reason I stopped was because the state premier of New South Wales, pulled the funding for all the drug and alcohol. I was funded through drug and alcohol. He pulled it to pay for the 2000 Olympics.
And yet you told me that most of the crimes, if I can use that word, are addiction-based. A vast majority of them. I remember you saying that at the time.
A very, very high percentage of crime now is related to substance abuse.
Yeah.
Or, you know, to gambling, to some sort of process addiction.
Yeah.
As well. Addiction, I remember back when I was living in Los Angeles, this was in 1984, the World Health Organization made a statement saying addiction is the crisis of our time.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed.
It still is, yeah.
It's worse.
So
go on.
I'm just saying we're coming to the end of this, and, you know, I haven't even touched on so many areas that I know you can share with us. I'm wondering if you'll come back again and we can continue, because I think I'd like to particularly hear some of your experiences working in the refugee camps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
absolutely,
it's nearly half an hour and we're only getting warmed up, I feel.
There's been a lot of wisdom. Time's gone.
Yeah. And I like what you said, that this curiosity, because I've heard that actually curiosity is key to courage, even more than bravery. That when we're curious, we are willing to stretch ourselves. So, yeah, that really was very interesting too, to hear that was really behind, you know, the courage you had to do the things that you've done. And what I'd also like to do is ask you to, you know, maybe just take us into that feeling of resilience within ourselves. Would that be okay?
You
just
mean
to
like
do a little bit of a reflection, a meditation, like if we're feeling like we're fraying, how do we bring back that energy?
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I should have warned you about that bit.
Well, yes.
But you can do it. I know you can do anything. You've also got a background in acting, right? You're an actress or a director?
No,
director.
No. I started off working in the technical stage management side of theatre.
Right.
So I started off as a stage manager, which is a fabulous training for many things. And I got into the creative, into lighting design and things like that.
See, and that's another big area to talk about, because you're back in that area now, which I find fascinating. So we maybe have to have another 2 sessions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Jude. So let's just close with a few, thoughts on reflecting on what we've been talking about.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is this like a little meditation commentary?
Yeah, just a few minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'll take a deep breath. And center myself in the breath. And I move into the understanding that I am just a tiny speck of energy in this enormous, unfathomable space. And I bring spaciousness into my being. I allow that spaciousness to fill me. I breathe it in. Filling myself with space. Aware of the sensation in my heart. The center of my being. And I fill my heart with space. With space to love. And I stabilize myself in that space. Safe space. Or the heart is the doorway to resilience. Once I'm in my heart space, I can move freely. Wherever I need to go, or wherever I am called to be. And I can extend that safety to others. For resilience comes from the heart. And I feel it. Part of my energy. Part of who I am. And when I'm grounded, in resilience, there is no risk. And the obstacles turn into stepping stones in front of me. And in resilience, I become a transformer. Changing every obstacle into another stepping stone. Becoming more truly who I am. This is life. Shanti.
I really like the connection between the heart space and resilience. Very beautiful, and something we can all think about before we meet again. So thank you very much, Jude. It'll be very good to come back again and go deeper into this, even deeper into this topic of resilience. So stay tuned for part 2. Thank you, Jude.
Thank you. That's fun.
Bye.